after individual 1 was elected in 2016. I think we can all agree that that was a moment we would not like to relive ever again. What these women did was they assessed the disease of our democracy partly as a failure of us to elect progressives at the state level. They figured out 2 years ago, plus maybe more than 2 years ago, that this isn't a national nightmare. More specifically, it's a nightmare that came to us up from the states. So it's at the state level that we will rebuild, repair, and reinvigorate our democracy. Gabby and Rita will tell you how this works and why it's so important today. Sister District's mission is to build and maintain progressive power by creating Democratic majorities in state legislatures across the country. The Republicans have focused on state races for decades, flipping what used to be blue states to red states. Sister District is helping us play critical catch-up to take back our state legislatures. Here's a really scary statistic. In 1976, Republicans controlled no state houses. In 2016, they controlled 25. So we've got to take that back. Sister District Marin is relaunching in 2019 with 4 new leaders, me, Bridget Gleason, Linda Herman, and Barb Miller. We are all district captains for Sister District Marin. We have to do 4 of us because it takes 4 of us to replace Sarah Brew, who used to do this. And we are deeply grateful to her for her organizing and leadership, and we're going to do our best to make her proud. Sister District Marin has already been postcarding. You've probably been coming to some of our postcard parties where we're participating in a study of sending postcards to voters in Mississippi to see if after 3 waves of postcards, they're more likely to vote in November in their election. But I'll tell you more about that later. We're also planning ahead to be able to make an impact in November 2019, that's this year, state house elections in Virginia, Mississippi, and Louisiana. We will be contacting and motivating voters there, and we will have some pretty amazing fundraisers that I promise will be painless and, God forbid, fun. For example, we're going to kick off our first House Party fundraiser as a clothing swap, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And we're going to continue to build up excitement and community throughout the spring so that we can start firing on all cylinders in June and July. So how do we do that? We're going to tell you that today. But let me introduce Linda Herman. She's a fellow district captain with me and Barb and Bridget. Linda is probably pretty familiar to you because wherever there is good electoral work going on and wherever there is leadership development and building of grassroots coalitions, there is Linda. So here's Linda Herman.
Hi. Can you hear me? Do you need me to use the mic?
Use the mic, please.
Okay, I'll use the mic. I don't know that I have much more to say. I'm a co-lead in Swing Left Marin. I'm a co-founder on the steering for Rock the Congress, if anybody has been to that event, and an instigator of NorCal Blue Wave Alliance, if anybody's familiar with that. But I'm here as Pete Kronowit, who's district captain in San Francisco, reached out to me going, hey, you want to take over Sister District Marin? And of course we said yes. So that's why we're here today. So I have the pleasure of introducing 2 of the co-founders of Sister District, Rita Bosworth, who's the executive director, and Gabby Goldstein, who's their political director. So they're going to get into more detail for what their strategy is and their actions, and then we'll go back to how Sister District Marin fits into that whole picture. So Rita?
Hello? No, that's not right. Hello? Hello? Okay. All right. Well, it's so wonderful to see you here. I feel like I'm in front of the screen. Thank you so much for coming out on a rainy Saturday. It's exciting to see activists that are ready to go. And what is it? It's March now, so we're getting into election season. And so we are beyond thrilled that people are still involved, still engaged, and still focused on taking back our democracy. So what I want to do is I'm a little bit of an evangelist for state races, and I'm here to convince you that the strategy that we have set forth in terms of winning back state legislatures is the strategy we should all be focusing on, and we should all be talking to our friends and bringing them here to the next meeting to focus on, because it is so important in terms of winning in a strategic and long-term manner for the Democrats. So I want to take you back to 2016 the day that it happened, and when really none of us expected this result. And maybe we weren't as involved as in retrospect we would have been. But when the election in 2016 happened, I think we felt it strongly here in blue areas, particularly in California. Because if you remember, in 2016, California elected a supermajority of Democrats to our state legislature, and we were choosing between 2 Democrats for our open Senate seat. So we were clearly moving in a democratic and progressive direction, but the results of that election made us feel like we were so far apart and divided from the rest of the country, which just felt like it was going the completely opposite way. And that didn't make sense to me. But as you start thinking about it, we aren't really that far divided from the rest of the country, because actually the country did elect a Democrat by the popular vote. It's just because of the mechanism of our electoral system that Donald Trump won the presidency. So we actually are a majority of the country. We didn't win the presidency. But beyond that, the majority of the country, we didn't have the Senate, we didn't win Congress, we didn't win even close to a majority of the states, and this really started eating at me. How is it that we are a majority of the country, a pretty significant majority of the country, but we don't have a majority of electoral power? That's a problem. Now, it's different than the hearts and minds question. If we really were truly a minority, it would be a matter of going out and changing people's minds, but that's not what's happening. And that's what makes it so frustrating, because that does not feel democratic, it's unfair, it's unrepresentative, the people are not being represented. So that's what really stuck in my mind as a big problem. And then the second thing that stuck with me was how powerless I felt, because I live in a deep blue district, and I did what I was supposed to do. I called my representative, I donate my money, I make my phone calls, but then you feel like there's not much else you can do, because when you call your representatives, they agree with you, and then you think, well, what's next? What else can I do? And so I saw this problem on two kind of levels. Number one, we're a majority, but we don't have a majority of power. And number two, there are so many of us who feel powerless because we live in districts where we are represented in our district, but that doesn't translate beyond those boundaries, and that makes it so that strategically we're not able to be fairly represented. So that's how the idea for Sister District was born. It was the idea that we, particularly in these deep blue areas, but of course also in deep red areas or anywhere that people don't feel that they're represented, we need to channel and harness that energy and those resources and send it to places where it will make a difference. My congresswoman is Anna Eshik. She's been in Congress for 3 decades. And she doesn't, she wins by 80% every year. She doesn't need me to send her my $50. She doesn't need me to knock on doors for her. But I can send $50 to somebody. I can knock on doors for somebody. I want to do it for somebody where it's going to make a difference. And so that was the idea of Sister District, is to organize people in these particularly deep blue districts, channel those resources to places that we identify as strategic, where the Democratic candidate needs a boost in order to get them over the edge. So that was the idea. And when I first started thinking about this in 2016, you may or may not know, I wasn't involved in politics or campaigns before that election. I'm an attorney. I was a public defender for 12 years, so certainly I was in public service, but not in this line of work. So I feel that I was aware of what was happening, more than the average bear, but I wasn't super into the nitty-gritty. But as I started talking to people, and Gabby joined me pretty quickly after I put this idea out there, and our other co-founders. So as we started talking to people and learning about what was going on, what we realized was, at the time, everybody was talking about flipping Congress, because in 2016, that seemed like the one thing that we might be able to do in 2018 to kind of stop the bleeding. And that's not untrue. But the problem with Congress is that Congress has elections every 2 years, and those elections cost millions and millions and millions of dollars each now. And those elections are actually very strongly influenced by what happens in the states, because states control redistricting. And so it became very clear that if we want to flip Congress in a long-term and sustained manner, we must win back power in the states. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So everybody knows that every decade, the Constitution mandates that there's a census to be taken, and that's supposed to count every person living in the country. It's coming up. We're having one in 2020. After the census, the year after the census, every single state gets a portion of the 435 seats in Congress based on their population. And that's a process called reapportionment. And so every 10 years, when each state gets its share of the congressional seats, the state gets to determine how to draw the maps that send those people to Congress. And that's a process that's called redistricting. So redistricting happens once every 10 years. Well, you might think, drawing maps, that seems pretty straightforward. What could possibly be political about that? Well, there's something called gerrymandering that's been going on since 18-something, many, many years. And it's the process of a partisan person or a partisan entity drawing maps to favor themselves or favor their party to unfairly weight their power in Congress. And what it means is that the politicians are choosing the voters instead of the voters choosing the politicians. And it's really insidious and egregious. And I'm going to give you 3 examples so you understand how this all relates and why it's so important and why it matters that we get involved in state races. The first example I like to give is North Carolina. North Carolina is a state that in 2016 went for Trump, but by less than 50%. He got, I think, 49.7% of the vote. That same year, they elected a Democratic governor by 10,000 votes. That is what we call a purple state, folks. But because the Republicans control the state legislature in North Carolina, the Republicans have 10 of 13 of their congressional representatives. So that's a state, it's a purple state, it should be 6-7. If they have 13 seats, one party should have 6 seats, one should have 7. Republicans have 10 seats, Democrats have 3. And that's because the Republicans are able to draw the maps to pack Democrats into 3 districts and then crack the rest of them into the rest of the districts. You look at a state like Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is another state that we can fairly call a purple state. That's a state that has a Democratic governor, it has a Democratic senator. It also went for Trump by less than 50%. And yet in 2016, 13 of their 18 congressional seats went to Republicans. Again, because the Republicans control the state legislature, and the state legislature got to draw those maps. And then you look at a state like Virginia. Now Virginia is, I think we can call it a blue state. It's very close to being a blue state. It has a Democratic governor, 2 Democratic senators. It went for the Democratic presidential candidate. The last 3 election cycles, they went Obama, Clinton. And yet, in 2016, 7 of their 11 congressional seats belong to Republicans. So you can see, and that again is because the Republicans control the state legislature. So you can see how our representation in Congress, and congressional votes, by the way, they affect us out here in California. If anybody says to you, well, let's just build a big wall around California and nobody else can affect us, that's just not true. And we know that's not true because those folks that are voting in Congress, their votes are affecting us out here. So this gerrymandering that's happening on the state level in states across the country, that's affecting us out here in California in a very big way. So what we have to do is we have to shift that balance of power. And we saw that in 2016, Democrats needed to win back 23 seats in order to flip Congress. Well, if you look at how gerrymandered the states were, and you look at the portion of seats that Republicans gave themselves in Congress, that came out to just around 23 seats, not surprisingly, okay? So this is why, if you ever feel like you're going a little crazy because you think, how is it that we're a majority of the country but we don't have a majority of power? That is why. The system is actually literally rigged against Democrats. Now, both parties do this. It's just that in 2010, at the time of the last census, that's when there was a big Republican backlash against the election of Barack Obama. And so the Republicans went through this the last decade, and they went in there, and in 2010 they had a huge year. They won all sorts of power in the states, and that meant they were in the perfect position in 2011 when redistricting happened to make all of these terrible maps that we are now living with right now. So when we're talking about the importance of state legislatures, that's one of the main reasons. States control redistricting. I think it's 34 states. It used to be 37, now it's down to 34. In 34 states, it is the state legislature, the people in power who get to decide who gets elected. It's madness. There's no other democratic country that does this on the planet. It's total madness. There are things happening. For example, in the last election, 3 states or 4 states passed ballot initiatives to bring about independent redistricting. California has independent redistricting. There are lawsuits that are happening to sue people for unconstitutional gerrymandering, but those take time and they don't always have the right effect. And so really what we need to do is just win those elections. We've got to win those state level elections to win back that power. But I will also say that there are other reasons states are important. So of course redistricting is one of the main ones, but also states are policy laboratories for good policy. You know, you hear in the national news the debates about gun control and climate change and women's rights, all these things, they rarely go anywhere. Congress is so toxic and so deadlocked that this stuff is rarely getting through at the federal level. But it's getting through in every one of the 50 states, because the states are really the places where all of these policies are getting legislated. And if we get progressives in charge in the states, that is our opportunity to get legislation out there that then other states can copy, and eventually that gets pushed up at the federal level. It's really hard for us to do that when we don't have any power in the states. And so that's how we start going on the offensive. And then the third reason states are important are because states are a pipeline for us to build our bench. It's how we get good candidates in on the ground level so they can become good national candidates. Barack Obama was a state senator in Illinois. Half of US presidents started off as state legislators. This is how they get the name recognition, the experience to build our bench. If you remember, a couple years ago, it felt like we had no bench. Well, that's largely because during Barack Obama's presidency, Democrats lost almost 900 state legislative seats. And so not only were we not getting our policies through, but we didn't have a field team. And that needs to change. So those are the 3 main reasons that states are so important. And you know, a lot of us, we tend to focus on those big, shiny races. Do people remember John Ossoff? Georgia 6? Okay. John Ossoff, you know, that was such an interesting race because I think it was emotional for all of us. It was the first kind of big federal race after Trump. We desperately wanted to know that our country was full of good people that weren't gonna, you know, Trump was a fluke and we were gonna elect a Democrat in this district. $32 million was spent on John Ossoff's race. And you wanna know the crazy thing? If everything had gone our way, if he had won, if our wildest dreams had come true, it would have meant nothing because that's 1 out of 435 seats in Congress and it's up for election again in 2 years. So we have to start getting smart about where we're putting our resources. If you put $32 million in any state in the country, you would just win their legislature back and you'd be able to do so much good on every level, not to mention winning back congressional seats because you'd have fairer maps and those would come to us a lot more easily than fighting these uphill battles in every race. So that is why we are so focused on states and we think this is the strategic way to go. For, you know, not just now, but forever, but particularly now, because redistricting is just 2 years away. We have an opportunity right now to win back power in the states so that we can get fair maps drawn on the state level and in Congress for the next decade, and we won't get that chance again till 2031. So I hope that gives everybody some context and background about why we are so enthusiastic and believe so much in state work. And I'm going to turn it over to Gabby now, who will give you more details on our specific political strategy, what we have done, and where we're going in the future. And then we'll be here for questions after Gabby talks.
Yeah.
Read a buzz right, everyone. Amazing. Amazing. Such a pleasure to actually hear you talk. I feel like we divvy these things up so often that it's rare to actually hear it. It sounds amazing. Amazing. Well, what can I tell you? You guys are all set on state races, right? We're all on board here. I'll just spend a couple minutes talking about our strategy, what we did in 17 and 18, what we're doing this year in 19, and what our plans are in 2020. So, as Rita very eloquently explained, our goal is to build and maintain progressive power at the state legislative level. When we were starting this organization, we identified that as an overlooked venue of power for Democrats. It was really a place where we felt we could have a big impact. And so, as Rita mentioned, there's a variety, actually this gets cut off, there's a variety of reasons why state ledge matters. No need to go into them. Policy pipeline. I'm very proud here in California we have our supermajority. We've been able to export really great policy all over the country in areas from environmental policy, setting air quality standards with CARB over decades, and workers' rights, you name it, California's been a leader there. But on the Republican side, they know this too. So who's heard of ALEC?
Yeah.
Okay, right? So Republicans have been using states as a policy pipeline for regressive policy for a really long time. So we really need to catch up, leadership pipeline, and of course, districting. Very, very important stuff. So what do? We take the position that we need to approach this issue of building power in state legislatures through both electoral means, getting more Democrats elected, as well as non-electoral strategies, including voter registration and voter education. You need both sides of those coins to really make progress. In terms of political strategy, this is so strange. I don't know why this is getting cut off.
70% slides.
There's 70% slides.
No, you said it to
Okay.
Really got to come out.
Yeah, it really this is so strange. I don't know.
What
Okay,
was the
well,
problem?
maybe I'll just go off script. I don't know, it's not helpful if they're not all, well, anyways. So we focus on 3 types of chambers. So there's many thousands. Yeah, there's many thousands of state legislative seats all over the country. And so how do we choose? How do we go from, last year there were over 6,000 state leg races. How do we go from that down to just a few dozen that we want to work in? So what we do is every year our basic political strategy is the same, although the mix of states and chambers changes. But the basic strategy is we focus on 3 types of chambers. The first are chambers that we think we can flip in one cycle. So these are chambers where Democrats are down just a few seats, and we think that if we support a good number of Democratic candidates there, we can flip that chamber blue in just 1 year, one cycle. The second are blue holds. These are chambers where Democrats have a really fragile majority, maybe just 1 or 2 seats, and we really need to hold on to that majority and expand that majority. And then the third are not presented on the slide, but what we call no chamber left behind, or blue inroads chambers. These are chambers where Dems are down quite a few seats. We probably can't flip it in one cycle, but we really have to lay some groundwork, flip as many seats as we can to put ourselves in position to flip the next time around, or to make those critical gains over time. So as I mentioned, every year that mix of chambers that we end up supporting will differ depending on what chambers are up, what races are going, what the composition of the state ledge looks like in any given year. And then just to point out, that's on the electoral side. We also have SDAN, our C4, and it sounds like you guys are doing some postcards for one of our experiments. Through SDAN, we really like to think of this mission as having 2 sides of the coin. There's the electoral work, getting folks elected, and then there's the non-electoral work of building an educated base of voters who are registered to vote, who know why voting is important, so that when we get great candidates to run, people actually are able to go out and vote for them. So in 2017, that was our first cycle. I like to say that it was a soft landing for a new political director. Actually none of us co-founders came from politics. My background is also as a lawyer. And so 2017 was a soft landing because there weren't very many states holding state leg elections. Just like 2019, it's an off year, so it was just a very small handful of states. So we really focused on Virginia, which was our blue, this is the strangest thing, I'm so sorry about these slides, but it blue inroad state in 17 because Dems were down so many seats in the lower chamber. And then there were a few special elections in 2017. So we were able, through our support of a fantastic candidate for Washington Senate, to flip the upper chamber of Washington blue in 2017. Did anyone work on Manka Dingra's race or know about Manka? She's now doing fantastic work as a senator in Washington. And our very first sister race as an organization was Stephanie Hansen. The very first state legislative race after Trump's election was our very first sister race, and we were able to hold on to the Delaware State Senate with her win. So that was huge. And what's not on the slide is our work in Virginia. We supported 13 candidates in the lower chamber in Virginia, and 12 of them won, which brought Virginia from being very much a blue inroads, no chamber left behind state, into what we have this year, which is a posture where we're ready to flip both chambers of that legislature this year. These slides are just, again, it's funny because we're missing our inroads, but last year, again, we had to go through that funnel of there being 6,000 state races. How do we go from that down to just a few? So we focused on a few different chambers that met those basic categories for our political strategy. In terms of blue flips, we supported a few candidates for the Colorado Senate who were successful, and that chamber flipped blue. Colorado is now a Democratic trifecta. We also supported, I'm just going to go off the slides after this, but we also supported a few candidates in the Maine State Senate, and were able to flip that chamber blue. And Maine is now a blue Democratic trifecta. So these were really important wins. We also supported a few of our candidates who were running, they were alums running again for the Delaware State Senate and Washington State Senate, held on to those. And actually in Washington, we picked up several more Democratic seats in the Senate. And now Washington just has this beautiful blue state legislature that has already passed so many great policies around automatic voter registration and other sorts of gun safety legislation, etc. And then in terms of our inroads, that should have its own slide. But we supported candidates in the Michigan Senate and House, and were actually able to break Republican supermajority in the Michigan Senate, which was fantastic. Similarly, in Pennsylvania, we supported both upper and lower chamber candidates there and broke a Republican supermajority as well. So it was a really, really great year, and really, I think, showed how we can operate in an environment where there are 6,000 races and really hone in on just a few dozen that are really critical to either flipping a chamber, holding a chamber, or putting ourselves into a good position for the next cycle. So this year, we are in an off cycle. So there are very few states holding state leg elections this year. It's just Virginia, Louisiana, Mississippi, and New Jersey. And New Jersey doesn't need our help, so we're not going to be working in New Jersey. They have a good Democratic base. Pennsylvania is there because we are currently supporting a special election in the Pennsylvania State Senate, which I'll mention in a few minutes. But this is sort of a schema of the chambers and the states that we're looking at this year, and the type of chamber that they are in terms of our general political strategy. So again, Virginia is in the great position of just being 2 seats down in its Senate and 2 seats down in its lower chamber from flipping blue. So we're in a great position to help Virginians flip both of their chambers this year. Louisiana, Mississippi, these are tougher roads. These are really, really red states, but they have some really great things going for them this year. And I've been spending a lot of time specifically working in Mississippi and Louisiana, and folks there Democrats feel very abandoned. They're very eager for any support, any help, and really have they have a sense that we are in community together, but we just need to sort of show up for our neighbors and help there. And a little goes a really long way in Mississippi and Louisiana. And then there'll be some special elections. We're supporting Pam Iovino. Has anyone seen anything from us about Pam? Great. I have a slide, if the slide works, about Pam in a little while. Now, one thing I just wanted to mention here is last chance. So what does that mean? So, in looking at 2020, which we'll get to in a couple minutes, in looking at 19 and 20, we said to ourselves, okay, well, we're again going to be in a big space in 2020. There's so many states holding state-led elections. How are we going to choose? How are we going to prioritize? So we decided to prioritize what we are calling last chance chambers or races. And these are the races where this is our last chance to elect Democrats ahead of the next round of districting in states where the state legislature controls districting. So as Rita mentioned, not all state legislatures draw district lines. Most do. 34 of our states use that mechanism to redraw their district lines. And so we're going to focus on those states. In 2019, you can see that all of our states are in that category, and then in 2020, we'll be prioritizing those as well. So I just want to say a couple things about Pam, since she's our special election. The election is on April 2nd. It's coming up really quickly. Pam's an incredibly capable, qualified, fantastic candidate. If we could just have Pams all over the country, my job would be just even better than it is. But she's a career Navy veteran, proven leader. After serving a long career in the Navy, she then went on to a Senate-confirmed presidential appointment as Assistant Secretary of the Department of Veteran Affairs. And then even after that, that wasn't enough for her. She came back to the Pittsburgh suburbs and served as Director of Veteran Services for her county. So she's extremely embedded in her community. She's from the Pittsburgh suburbs, which is where this district is. And it's a really good district. So in addition to having a great candidate, it's a really good district. It did go for Trump by a little bit in 2016, but since then has gone for Democrats in their gubernatorial election last fall, as well as Senate, and 93% of her district is nested in that Connor Lamb special congressional district. Now, did anyone follow the Connor Lamb and Pennsylvania races? So you might remember that after Connor Lamb was elected, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court held that the congressional seats were gerrymandered and new lines were drawn. So Connor Lamb now has a different congressional district set of lines, and Pam's district is now split between 3 different congressional districts under the new lines. But the point of it is that Connor Lamb was able, basically entirely in Pam's district, to flip that seat blue, which I think should give us a lot of confidence that with the right candidate and a great campaign, this district can go blue as well. And another great thing about this district is you can see here the split between Republicans and Democrats in the Pennsylvania Senate. If we are able to flip this seat blue, then that means that next year, Dems are only down 4 seats in that chamber, which would move it into flip territory, which would be absolutely amazing for Pennsylvania and, of course, for the rest of us. So we're going to be focusing on Virginia this year. Mississippi and Louisiana are a little they're harder, and we're really trying to have our southern teams provide sort of on-the-ground support for those races. So most of our races are going to be in Virginia this year. They've got a divided government, as we know. If we've been following what's been going on with their governor and the rest of the executive, it's going to make our work more important. There's going to be a significant fundraising gap in Virginia because the governor is not really going to be able to raise a lot of money. The governor had pledged a lot of money to the state house caucuses, and that money is very likely to be not forthcoming, right? He's just not going to be able to deliver. And so there's going to be a big fundraising gap, which makes our work really important. If we want to help flip these chambers blue, it's going to cost more for the rest of us because Northam is not able to fundraise. And not just Northam, but all the, sort of the entire executive team. So, the entire state legislature is up in Virginia this year. These are all last chance races in this, and as I explained before, this is our last chance before the next census next year and redistricting thereafter. And this is a state, at least for now, where the state legislature draws the district lines. One other thing I'll say about, I'll just say a few other things. So, I think, as Rita very rightly pointed out, I think Virginia is pretty blue. It's just that its state legislative seats have been drawn in a way that really favors Republicans. The demographic shifts in that state definitely favor us. And one other thing that's really good for us this year is that there was a racial gerrymandering case that was brought in federal court about 11 districts in the lower chamber in Virginia, which the court found these districts were unconstitutionally racially gerrymandered, and they've been ordered to be redrawn, and they've been redrawn. And many of those seats are much more favorable for Democrats than they were before. So the lower chamber looks even better than it did before going into this. The one thing, the caveat there is that unfortunately, there are a number of those newly drawn, very Democratic districts that don't have Democrats running in them yet.
Oh.
And the filing deadline is in 2 weeks. So if you have any friends in Virginia, let me know, because we're getting a little bit worried about those open seats. But we'll see what happens there. I mean, I'm hopeful that it's frustrating to me because it is a lot of people's jobs to make sure that doesn't happen. And so it's frustrating that we're this close to the filing deadline and that's the situation. But we'll take it as it is, and even so, I think that there's great paths forward for that chamber this year. I mean, we know that the executive is embroiled in controversy. Republicans are raising tons of money off of all of this, the Northam situation, and Justin as well. I mean, the whole thing has been a boon for Republicans, and they're taking this as an opportunity to smear Democrats, raise huge amounts of money. It's just going to make our work harder, more important. We're going to just have to dig our heels in. And Republicans have also been attacking other incumbent Democrats in the legislature in Virginia. I don't know if anybody's been following what's been happening with Kathy Tran, who made a sort of an inartful statement, maybe, about a bill, a women's reproductive health bill, which has now turned into this gigantic thing. Republicans are raising huge amounts of money against her. So it's not going to be a walkthrough. The point of this is really to say things look good in Virginia, but there are some really, really serious challenges. And it's going to take all of us putting our heads down and raising money and doing the work to get them over the line. If not for Northam, then maybe it would have been easier. If not for some of these things, but it's going to be tough. So I'm not going to say too much about Louisiana and Mississippi. These are really tough states. These races are very cheap. We're looking at budgets in these races of like $50,000 total. In Virginia, the budgets are often over $1 million for state ledge races. Very expensive in Virginia. So Louisiana, Mississippi, much cheaper. Great opportunities in these states. In Louisiana, 40% of the seats are open this year because of term limits, which is a huge opportunity for Democrats. There's there's a Democratic governor in the state who's running a re-election campaign this year. Mississippi, this is also a tough place, but there's also a competitive gubernatorial race this year. And so I think there's a lot of energy in the South. And what I say to folks is, what do we mean about being excited about Stacey Abrams and Andrew Gillum and Mike Espy if we're not going to show up and raise a few dollars for these folks who are running this year? What does it mean for us to care about the South or feel like talk about the ascendant South if we're not willing to put in a little bit of energy? And these as I said, these races are not They're not expensive, they have great strategic value, and I'm really, really excited about Louisiana, Mississippi. Could talk about them all day. In 2020, it's the same strategy. We're always looking for blue flip chambers, blue hull chambers, and those inroads chambers. And of course, this is the end of the line next year. The last chance of all last chances before the next round of districting. So in terms of blue flips, these are the chambers that we're looking at. Some of these may be cut off, but this looks about right. Blue holds, gotta keep those going. I'm sorry. Oh, Minnesota Senate, Wisconsin Senate, Michigan House. Those are all within 4 of Democrats flipping. And if we flip Pam's seat in the Pennsylvania Senate, we can add the Pennsylvania Senate to our blue flip list. We've got a couple of those fragile chambers we just flipped the Colorado Senate, and Republicans are already all over that. They've brought various pieces of litigation trying to recall state senators who were just elected in Colorado, and all the rest, and so that's going to be a real battle next year. And then on the blue inroads, there's a lot. There are a lot of states that we're looking at. These are all chambers that probably can't flip next year. These are all states that are important battlegrounds for the presidential and of course for districting. And so these are the chambers that we're looking at. And of course, it'll depend on so many factors for next year, right? Who's going to run? Will there be additional special elections this year that change the composition of the chambers? We don't know yet. But we're already on the ground. I'm actually going to Texas in a couple weeks with my co-founder Lala to meet with folks in Austin, start getting our arms around opportunities in Texas next year and start embedding ourselves there. And we're doing that all across the country, making connections with activists on the ground, organizations and activist groups that are on the ground doing the good work so that next year we can help link everyone up and make some really great progress. So that's what I've got. Always happy to ask questions, but we'll give it back. Here we go.
Well, thank you. Questions? Anybody have any questions?
I have a question. I'm assuming that you work with Emerge and run for something
Yeah.
for finding candidates.
Yeah, so, I mean, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh,
Somebody.
okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we're not in the recruitment business. Emerge is amazing, and local hero Andrea Dusteel, she's amazing. Emerge has affiliates in various parts of the country. Sometimes their affiliates are PACs that can do electoral work. Sometimes they're nonprofits that can't. So for instance, in Louisiana, there's an amazing Emerge Louisiana who we're working with very closely, and they're able to do recruitment because they're on the political side. And then of course run for something. Yeah, and they're doing some great work as well.
Yeah.
Can you address the question, the census question regarding whether citizenship and what's happening with that?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know much more than what we've all read, which is that Judge Seaborg in the Northern District just said that they could not add a citizenship question to the census. That's of course very important because there's a big concern that if they add a citizenship question, then people who aren't citizens won't respond. Of course, the Constitution doesn't say only citizens are counted; they say everybody's counted. So that's obviously a great victory. I mean, my guess is that's going to go all the way to the Supreme Court, and I have little faith in the Supreme Court. So, I mean, if I had to guess, I would guess that they say that it can get added ultimately. But I mean, it was a good decision because he said not only did they violate the Administrative Procedure Act, but also he said no matter what you can't add it because it's like basically goes against what the Constitution wants. So we'll see. I mean, I think there's a real risk that California is one of the states that could lose a representative if they don't have the question. I don't know. We're not doing census work. We're not on the ground getting people to fill out the census. There are groups that are doing that, and I think it's worthwhile to support them. But I think this is really going to come down to what the Supreme Court says and when they say it. That's my take on it. Yeah.
Does it make sense to go after states that were close electorally in the 2016 election that maybe are on there?
20, but not for that reason, for other. So, I mean, it's a complicated question. But certainly Arizona, the reason why Arizona is not on our list for next year is because they have an independent redistricting commission. So their state legislature doesn't draw their district lines. And we're really trying to prioritize those in our 2020 races. But we did work in Arizona last year, and I think that Arizona is on fire. Dems are fired up there, and next year should be a really good year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you publish the candidates that you are supporting? In other words, is there a place where we can go to see what these candidates are?
Yeah, so
To
we're
get
all,
information, et cetera? Yeah.
absolutely. So this team will be assigned to a couple of specific candidates for field and fundraising support, but you can always, of course, also donate to our other candidates. It'll be on our website. We're looking at an early April public announcement for our 2019 races. You can find out information about Pam, though, on our website now.
Right, yeah, we haven't been assigned our candidates yet. Yeah, so,
Well, but I'm looking at all of them where information can be passed out, especially if you're running in Virginia, but I forget how many campaigns are on.
well, they haven't had their primaries yet, right?
Well, so their primary is June 11th, but we're going to be supporting so we don't get involved typically in contested primaries where there's more than one Dem running. Their filing deadline is the 28th of this month. So then we'll be able to announce support of folks who are not facing contested primaries. But you can read all about our prior races on our website. We've got information about all our candidates there.
Sarah?
I thought it was really helpful to hear your explanation of why we're not, with Sister District, focusing on Arizona. Are there other states that are close, that are in that category where Sister District is not focusing on them because they have an independent commission or another way of doing redistricting for the apportionment of the House seats?
Well, so the one that's kind of obvious is Michigan. Michigan is on our list for next year as a flip. They passed their ballot initiative last fall to establish an independent districting commission. The reason why in some sense, they shouldn't be on our list. The reason why they are on our list for next year is because they're still on their bad maps in 2020. Next year, the commission doesn't go into effect until the following year. So that's one. But I can't think of. I mean, not off the top of my head. I mean, it's California. There's Ohio passed an interesting set of reforms, but they're still, at the end of the day, their state ledge does still draw the line. So we kept them on our list. But none besides Arizona come to mind.
Barry?
Did you get any pushback for working out of state that you're?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's totally something we're aware of. You know, we're a lot of people from the coast and from liberal areas that are going into other races. So the first thing to say is that we only support candidates if they want our support. So Gabby reaches out to all the candidates we identify and says, this is what we can offer you. It's up to you if you want our support, because we only want to help you if you want our help. What we bring to them is so remarkable, and by that I mean when Gabby calls these folks and says, hey, this group of volunteers in California wants to raise money for you. I mean, jaws drop, because that just doesn't happen when you're an unknown person running for a state legislative candidate somewhere. I mean, we're raising on average, I think, $27,000 per race, and we're able to actually bring them capacity. That's one of the hardest things for campaigns to do is get volunteers to work for them, but it's necessary for any volunteer, for any campaign to win. So when we say we're gonna be able to raise money and also bring you this capacity, what we're able to bring has so far outweighed any of the negatives. And I don't think there have been too many negatives. Like, we've definitely seen a couple of our candidates have had their Republican opponent say, oh, this person has 600 donations from California. But, you know, the stuff is so small scale, it's not getting that much press, and I don't think there's been any other type of pushback really. But we are being really careful about our southern states because that's a different ballgame, and that's why we're only assigning our southern teams to our southern states. Because our understanding from talking to folks on the ground is that, you know, they're much more reticent to have folks from the outside calling. So we're very aware of that, and that's why Gabby's been making so much effort to talk to the folks and figure out how they want us to help rather than us going in there and just saying, this is what we're doing.
Okay, now I'm going to ask my question.
Okay.
Where does our work intersect or not with Eric Holder's group, with the National District
Yeah, sure.
Committee?
So her question was, how does our work interact with Eric Holder's group, the NDRC, the National Democratic Redistricting Commission? So first thing to say is that we are in touch with the NDRC, and they've been a great ally. They are, like us, focused on states and the importance of redistricting, and of course, everybody I think probably knows by now that Barack Obama's on board with that group, and OFA has merged, and so they're great in the sense that we are very aligned on the result that we want. We're different in the sense that we are at our core organizers. I mean, we have teams all across the country. This is one of our 76 active teams. There are folks just like you that are meeting everywhere, and we really literally do that work of pairing each one of our teams with one of the races that we identify. NDRC has more of a top level bird's eye view, and they are, of course, identifying races. They're raising a lot of money. They use some of that money for litigation. So some of these gerrymandering lawsuits you're seeing are funded by NDRC. They're working on ballot initiatives. So some of the ballot initiatives you're seeing were funded by NDRC. So they're working on multiple strategies. We really are only in that organizing sphere. So we have a lot of conversations with them actually about how we can partner and how we can interact. And I think we'll have some partnerships moving forward. But the main thing is that we keep those channels of communication open, and we both have our eyes on the ball.
Great. Yeah.
Yes, I'd like to go back to one question before when you were sort of talking about addressing things nationally from here in California. I have some friends in Virginia, Delaware, and Pennsylvania who think it's really cool what I'm doing here in California, and I'd like to get them involved. Listening to your presentation today, I think the sister district agenda fits them perfectly. How national is this effort, or is it still very much kind of a California out thing?
Oh, yeah, no, it's definitely national. So I mentioned that we have 76 teams across the country. Those are all over the place. We have a team in Virginia, or at least DC, Northern Virginia. And we have a team in Philadelphia, a newish team in Philadelphia.
So would it be Sister District Pennsylvania or Sister
Yeah,
District
exactly. So what happens is everybody joins through our website, sisterdistrict.com. You go there and you type in your zip code, and that's how we know where you live, and that's how we know to put you in the team close to where you live. Now, obviously, not everybody in the country has a team that's in their proximity, but we find that most of the folks that sign up with us do have a team, you know, in some sort of major metropolitan area. We do have some other great teams, like one in southern Vermont. You know, we're building little teams in smaller places, but that's what they would do. They would go to the website, sign up, and put in their zip code, and then, so for example, your friends in Virginia would be placed into our kind of Northern Virginia DC team, and then we are in touch with all of our district captains, and they get bi-weekly updates from us, and we support them, and we give them information. And they also have control over their email list. So when you sign up, you're added to our national list, but also you're added to the list for your local team, so that then you can get connected and hooked in and work on those opportunities with your team.
Okay, thank you.
And, yeah, go ahead.
When you were talking about the experiment that you did with the postcard writing over the past year, was there any way to track the impact of that specifically? I mean, the experiment?
Yeah, definitely. So I am trained as a mixed method social scientist. My PhD is in health policy. So I'm very, very focused on running high quality randomized controlled trials. Last year was our first year as an organization at SDAN, which is our C4, and we ran 7 randomized controlled trials. In terms of the final impact, meaning who voted and who didn't vote, who received our postcard, the voter file, which is public information, is only available after February. And each state controls its voter file, and there's a different process for requesting the voter file from the Secretary of State in all of those states. So we're in the process now of getting those voter files back from the states where we did our experiments last year, so that we can literally go through and match up the names and see who voted and who didn't. And then we'll be able to do some regressions to see if getting our postcard had a significant effect on the outcome of voting or not voting. So those will be coming out in the spring. I mean, we're still getting the data back now. So certainly by summer, we should have results for all of our 2017 experiments.
I'm curious, how do people find out, like people who are here, how do they find out about Sister District?
The question is, how do people find out about Sister District? And I will say most of our growth is organic. At the beginning, if you'll remember, that week post 2016 election, people were just online and they were frantic for something to do. And so it was right place, right time. We got a lot of interest right away. And then it was, people share on social media, they email to their friends. One great thing about Sister District is that, we have a very specific plan and very specific action items. And what we found was there were a lot of groups post-election who formed and said, okay, these are my 25 closest friends. We want to do something. We just don't, we don't really know what. That's a perfect group to join Sister District, either as a Sister District team or as something we call an affiliate, which means you don't even have to call yourself Sister District. You can just plug right into our activities and pick those right up. And so that's what happened is as people that are interested in this work and interested in this activity and want to do something meaningful, you can kind of find the groups that are doing stuff. There's Indivisible, there was Swing Left, we sprung up, there were a bunch of groups that sprung up, but eventually the road is going to lead you to the thing that makes sense for you, and that's, our folks, I think, that volunteer for Sister District are people that want to make a big difference. They want to they want to do actual things, not just, post things on Facebook or generally donate. They want to use their time wisely. And they maybe you don't have a lot of time, maybe you do, but you want to be able to fit that into your schedule. And then you want to feel like you've done something and be able to see those tangible results from the work that you've done. So I think the people that join Sister District, it's a little bit self-selecting. There are folks that said, I don't want to do state, I want to do congressional races, and that's great. Everybody kind of has to find their thing. But the people that make their way to state races and want to do tangible action items for strategic and focused political work, they find their way to us. But it's a lot of word of mouth. It's organic. We have started to run some ads, but very, very little. We might do some more of that because we've actually had some success with that. But really, it's word of mouth. It's people telling their friends. It's people spreading the word. It's people saying, hey, I did this thing. You should join. It's been largely organic. And we've got about 45,000 members now across the country.
45,000 across the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one other thing, earlier this year we fielded a survey to our folks on our list, and I was really excited that we had over 1,200 responses, which if you run surveys is a pretty large survey response. You can really know some things. And most of the people who responded, the overwhelming majority of folks who responded are on a team, a Sister District team, and they identified the community aspect of their team as one of the central reasons why they volunteer with Sister District, as opposed to other activities that they could do. So I really echo Rita's thought that it's really about word of mouth and bringing your friends to do this in community together and build this little community together.
Which means bring your friends.
Find people whose voices are hoarse from screaming at the television and bring them to a meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
What, if anything, is being done to coordinate all the efforts of all the different grassroots organizations and not have overlap or competition?
Yeah, good idea. Good question. Her question was, what, if anything, is being done to coordinate among all of the groups that are out there? So we work hard to make sure that we are talking to every single one of the groups. And we have Lala Wu, who's our Director of Partnership and Engagements, has great relationships with basically the head of our organization. And so we have worked over the past 2 years to find out who they are, what they're doing, how it might interact or overlap with what we're doing, figure out a partnership if that makes sense, or help us hone and refine our strategy to make sure that what we're doing is not duplicative. And I like to say there's 3 reasons why I believe that Sister District is unique among all of these organizations. One is that we focus only on state races. Number 2 is that we coordinate directly with campaigns. There's a lot of groups out there that are PACs. They're raising money on the independent side, which means they can't talk to candidates. We actually talk to candidates to give them what they need. And the third is that we are actually organizing. We're in real life organizing. We're organizing right now. It's hard work, and most groups, I would say, are not organizing because it is so hard and so resource intensive. So those 3 things differentiate us from every other group. And you take a group like Emerge, for example, that came up earlier. It's a great complement between us and Emerge, because Emerge is, of course, working on races, getting women elected in all levels of government, but they don't have a next step. If they've got people that want to volunteer, they don't have that thing. So Emerge can send their people to Sister District. We have endorsed some Emerge alumni, and then those Emerge folks can volunteer for an Emerge alumni. So we look for those opportunities with all of the groups, and we work hard to make sure we're always in communication with all. We're always talking.
If I could just add to that, Rock the Congress and NorCal Blue Wave, that's their main mission, is to be building collaboration amongst all the groups to make people's efforts be more efficient and effective, not duplicative, amplify each other's, messages, et cetera, et cetera. So, and that's more local, Bay Area. Now, Rock the Congress is now partnering to do actually a national conference. It's all about collaboration. And NorCal Blue Wave is partnering with Southern California, so there'll be a California coalition. So, it's in the drinking water,
Let's take a. Oh, yeah.
Towards this, because I found out that Sister District for another group that I've been in since the election 2 years ago was We Rise Women. And Wallace come and spoken to us, so we've been partnering also. So and those of us that want to find out about other things and find out what else we can do, that's how I'm here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things going on.
Totally, and I would just say that aside from, we're at the headquarters level, and that's great, and partnerships are great at that level, but what you are all doing at the local level on the partnership side is fantastic. I mean, all over the country, Sister District teams are working hand in hand with indivisible teams, women's march huddles, all of the rest, and so, in addition to having conversations at the national level, which is good and great, and we do it, and we're coordinating where we can. 1,000 flowers are blooming out there, and that's where the real partnership often happens.
Yeah. I can answer questions. So one is that I've been getting most of my postcard addresses from Abby.
Who's Abby?
Tony the Democrat.
Oh.
The Democrat. So is that overlapping with what you guys are doing? I mean, or
different.
going to the same people? And then my other question was, I'm curious about, as an organization, what would you say percentage of time-wise is on postcards versus on the street versus phone calls versus, how do you, how does it play out?
Sure. So we don't work with Tony the Democrat. I don't know if he's sending postcards to the same people we are. We're getting them. We get our lists from the campaigns, and
So does he, so it would be the candidate
approaching
both of you?
I don't know is
So,
the bottom
yeah, that's what I'm
line.
saying.
What can I say? So in terms of what we do, last year our volunteers knocked about 50,000 doors, sent about 400,000 postcards, sent about 400,000 text messages, did about 160,000 phone calls. So if you break out how long those things take, you can figure that out. But and that's not even counting fundraisers and team events and sort of the togetherness and community building time. But I was really pleased with our growth in terms of our field numbers. We've at least doubled, and in some cases 2x, 3x, 5x what we had done in 17. So we actually just this week, I hired a head of campaigns who's working with me to improve our field programs and really double down on some of those field activities and continue to grow them so that we're giving our volunteers the most fun, impactful, highest quality action items that we can. So we take it very seriously, and but in terms of the time, we have an impact report on our website where I would love for everyone to check it out, where we went through and did a really serious program evaluation after the 18 elections and calculated all of that stuff. So we did it at like how many hours of phone banking, how many hours, and I think we came out to altogether our volunteers provided 34,000 hours, volunteer hours, for their candidates last year, which is, I mean, how many FTEs is that? I don't know, but like 2,000. I used to work at a law firm, so that's 2,000 hours a year. If you, so, this is amount of full-time FTE equivalents in terms of the output for our volunteers.
All right, great.
Was there on the impact report, was there one methodology that was more impactful per hour invested?
Well, we don't have the voter file, but I don't. Measuring impact is tricky, right? It's hard to show that your thing is the thing. But one way to look at it is that we had a number of candidates who, most of our candidates in 2018, their races were decided within 5 points. And I think that that shows that we were working in districts, in races that were really, really close. We had several races that were decided by less than 100 votes. We had several races that were decided by around 500 votes. And so that I think shows that the margin that we're working in is really, really small. And a lot of those people won, and some of them didn't win, but we got really, really close. So that's one way to think about impact.
Great, thank you. We want to put, thank you.
Thank you, everybody, so much.
Yeah, so on the heels of this.
Oh yeah, we're gonna take off. My kids are here and they've been waiting patiently.
Patiently, yes,
Yeah, we
please.
have to take off. But thank
Yes.
you so much, everybody.
Thank
This is
you
really
for
wonderful, and
coming,
thank you
yeah.
for having us.
It's on you.
Okay, I need my notes. Who's talking next? So on the heels of that, we want to talk about, can you hear me okay? Oh, okay. The things that we have planned for Sister District Marin that hopefully you'll play with us. So as they mentioned, fundraising is a really important thing. State races, typically the races that they're working in, some don't cost a lot, some cost a lot, like they mentioned Virginia, and so that's one way we get to support the candidates. But it's a decentralized approach, meaning the main way that we fundraise is through house parties. So that's inviting your friends over, maybe having a wine tasting, maybe one group we learned sells soup. We're planning a clothing swap. That was an idea that we learned from a group up in Sebastopol to raise money. And so what we're looking for, and there's lots of support also, so what we're looking for is people to be willing to host a house party. You get to invite whoever you want. It could be closed, it could be public if you want, or it could be private. It could be in your house, it could be in a venue. All options are open. And on March 31st, we're going to have a post training. So we'll give you all the resources you need, that's one great thing about Sister District, is they give you so many resources and support to do the work that they want us to do, so you're not making it up. So we're looking for people who want to host a house party where the goal is fundraising, but what you're doing should be a fun kind of thing. So I don't know if you remember some of the things we learned about at the summit.
Right, well, we were also just sort of brainstorming, like even a
Right.
bowl-a-thon or something really fun. It doesn't have to be painful at all.
Right.
So we want to have fun and we want to raise some money while we're having fun, basically.
So, and what we're going to do after we go through all the things that we're going to be doing, we're asking people to go and sign up and commit to something. And so that we have a house party hosting, and then I'll talk about phone banking. We're not doing phone banking yet. We're gearing up to like in June once we have a candidate. So that's another thing that Sister District does. So we'll be looking for people who just want a phone bank or host a phone bank. So to sign up there, but we're not going to be starting that till June. Take it away.
Can I talk? Okay,
Yeah.
good. So here's, I didn't know if I was live or not. So we are also doing a book club where we're going to meet at the end of May. The book currently under review is White Rage by Carolyn Anderson. And we're going to read the book and we're going to come together and talk about it. And that's one thing we're going to do. Another thing we're going to do is, as you mentioned, the clothing swap. We're going to launch the house party experience with a clothing swap that we're going to organize ourselves. And then we want you to come and see how much fun it is. And then we want you to come up with your own ideas, reach out to your own networks, and do something in your own home or your friends' homes. So we can continue this sort of relational organizing. It's sort of, you and your friends and us and our friends. That's how we're going to do this.
Right, I mean, just as an example, back to house parties, in 2018, the San Francisco chapter had 24 house parties, 3 bar parties, and they raised a total of $71,000, which in state races goes a long way. So it isn't like we're looking to raise $50,000, you know, whatever. So,
Wait,
Yes, we
what's a
are.
bar party? What?
well, I'm thinking you get a bar,
Oh,
you know, you go to a bar and you go, hey, come party, you know. And I have to say again, the resource, so San Francisco's actually put together a great like how-to house party guide. So we'll be going over all that kind of stuff at this March 31st sort of house party kickoff that we're gonna do for house party hosts.
What time is that going
It's kind of a probably a 3 to 5. It's a little bit of a TBD. So we'll publicize that once we get closer from the location. But it's again intended to have fun with a purpose, you know, not to be not painful.
So before you leave today, we want your name on at least one of these lists. Yes, ma'am.
So I found out about this from my book club. So is this a way to like mobilize our book clubs towards fundraising? Is that
Yeah,
Absolutely.
sure.
Yes,
Yes.
love it.
So is this like, are you suggesting that we bring this book to our book clubs and then use that as a jumping off?
You could, because there's a guide to having the book club reading. There's a lot of support provided to you if you want to do that. That would be great. Wonderful.
I mean, it's intended to build community as well as have a secondary effect, for sure.
And the other thing I want to talk about that we're doing now is postcarding. And we are postcarding as part of a 3-phase study that Sister District is doing to see if this postcarding is actually effective, to send postcards to low propensity voters in Mississippi. We're in the second wave of a 3-wave process, and the first wave was, hey, there's no election. The second wave is, look at the terrible things that the Republicans are doing. And the third wave is going to be, look at the great things the Democrats are doing. And this first wave is we're about halfway through, I'd say, but we have,
April 15th, I
I'm
think
sending
is
the
when.
postcards back to Mississippi, the 1,300 that I said I would complete. I'm sending them back to Mississippi on April 17th, and they'll be mailed from there. And just if you want to see an example of what one of these postcards look like, Jane has brought some that she's done. I think you did 475. She had 16 friends over, and she like blew through 475 postcards.
Over.
Oh.
This is three separate meetings of 16 friends.
Perfect. But you can do
Also,
this.
I-
Or do they address them?
We address.
You
we
do the
address
whole
that.
thing.
You do the whole, you color and you address.
Yep.
And I want to introduce Sarah, who is our postcard queen for this effort. And she had been meeting weekly at Key Cafe in San Rafael. So that was we were hosting events in San Rafael for people to come and do postcards also, which has been really successful. So we're done, that was another, 1,200 to Mississippi that we're done with. So when we get the next round, we'll be back at Key doing those as well, so people want to do them in their house.
And then there's one more postcard party that I know of that I'm hosting on March 20th at Solito's Restaurant in Sausalito at 6:30 p.m. And it's really wonderful. I call it existential therapy. If you want to just, feel like you're doing something really worthwhile that will be better than screaming at the TV or marching up and down your living room, this is really helpful. You're doing something great and you're connecting with people in your community, and you're going to feel better about doing this.
And the thing is, with these postcards, there's precise wording. You
Yes.
have to make
Yeah.
up what you're writing on there. They tell you this, you can't deviate
Nope.
from what they tell you. So you're just copying.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very controlled, it's the controlled study that they're doing now. So,
Are you nervous about, so there may be postmarked in Mississippi?
Yes.
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 Are you nervous about that firing, and-
well, they're postmarked in the state, we're mailing our postcards to a sister person in Mississippi, and then they mail them
Right.
to, right.
But you don't have to address on
Yeah.
They have no way of knowing that these came from
I'm also
California.
group where we've done tens of thousands of letters since 2004 to people in the state that we pick. And we've never had anybody do it, because we do the same thing, we would box them all up and send them to one person,
Yep.
who would then drop them in the mail on a specific day to get people to the polls to vote.
And, I mean,
It's a wonderful system.
we attended a summit for all district captains in February, and we actually asked the question, like, was that a strategic decision versus, we wanted, and the decision was made to have it be mailed within the state, so that was one less variable in assessing the effectiveness of the postcard. Versus if it was from California, the postmark, then all of a sudden you have a variable, well, did it coming from California matter or not matter? So they took it out, so they said, no, we're gonna move it from there. Conversely, Swing Left, who's doing a letter writing campaign right now, everything's being mailed from here, if you're working here, and that'll have whatever effect that'll have,
But they do provide a return address that is from the state you are
Yes,
in.
they do,
So
right.
first impression, looking at the envelope, it's from your own state. Only the postmark will see.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing.
So, any other questions? And
Yes.
run to the Post-its.
We're gonna be here to talk to you about these.
There no more at Sports Basement, is that done?
I think
Because,
you're
yeah,
on-
we're out of postcards. There will be again, yeah.
Yeah.
But we're out of postcards right now. We did them all. So the next
Salitos.
week.
Gotta go Salitos.
Salitos in Sausalito, yes.
Or
6:30
you
on
can
the.
go to Keatsy and write letters for Swing Left if you're looking for something to do.
No, it's good at night.
And if I have any extra addresses, I will give them to Sarah, and she can do one in Santa Fe.
Yeah, go ahead.
What you have another training for the house party goes that I'm not sure I can make that date.
We could talk about it,
Well,
sure.
we'll talk about it. I mean, certainly reach out to us. If you want to be involved, we don't want to say no.
Yeah, if you wanna be
can't come,
involved,
absolutely not. Like
we
I
want
said,
you.
Yeah.
I'll put my name up.
Yeah, please. Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions? We're here to help.
All right, let's sign up.
Yeah, let's sign up, okay.
When are you gonna find out who they're supporting?
We'll find out at the end of March after the final deadline.
And there is one race already, right?
Well, the special election in Pennsylvania.
That election
Yeah,
is April
that's
2nd,
that's
though,
what you
so that'll be
can,
over.
if you want to, we didn't bring any information about that one, but if you go to the sister district website, I'm sure that